Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to those of you around the world. Welcome to Trading Rebellion with your friends at Trade the Chain and Market Rebellion. My name is Nick Mancini, Director of Research at Trade the Chain, joined by good friends Monty and CJ, both Senior Research Analysts at Market Rebellion. We are here to break down everything going on in crypto, TradeFi, macro, and every single other buzzword that you can name in the market. So let's go ahead and kick things off with a bit of news, and then we'll go ahead and talk about, of course, the major price action from top crypto assets. Talk a little bit about equities coming off of their recent highs, trading mostly flat this week, slightly down. And of course, we'll talk about some shit coins and some altcoins that are catching our eye as they seem to be moving in with high beta compared to Bitcoin. Couple of those are, Pepe, XRP, STX. So definitely be chatting about some of those towards the end of the session. Make sure to stay along. So the big news that came out yesterday, not too much news this week. We had FOMC last week, no big data this week, but Jerome Powell talking in front of the Senate Financial Committee both yesterday and today. But yesterday was a lot more fireworks than today, it seems, especially as it pertains to crypto. So Fed Chair Jerome Powell says crypto appears to have staying power as an asset class. And he also said, we see stable coins as a form of money. He also added a quote. I think, CJ, you mentioned this when we were chatting before about, the Fed not managing a USDC. And that would be something, that the banks would kind of manage as an intermediary, which kind of means that the dystopian version of the CBDC that we've been discussing seems to not be at the forefront of the Federal Reserve or government's mind as it stands today. Now, they could be lying to us in 5 years, where every transaction over 1 cent is registered to the government. But, today as it stands, doesn't seem like it's DEFCON 5 in terms of CBDC wiping out all of crypto. So positive stuff there. And that obviously launched Bitcoin all the way up to 30.5. Maybe not the news that did it, but it was certainly news that helped it do it. So obviously the news came right around this juncture in price action, this range, and then whoop, big spike up all the way up to 30.8 before recovering back to about 30K today. So guys, Monty, CJ, what do we make of Jerome Powell's statements? Now, is this a reason? Is this, did we get the snap reaction that, we expect? Meaning is that kind of that language priced in? Or is that, the first boost and consolidation that in terms of more bullish price action off the heels of Jerome Powell's comments?
Yeah, it definitely, the market reacted to it, right? I thought it was kind of interesting how it took the market a little bit to react to the initial Blackrock news on the ETF earlier in the week. It was almost as if the market was so inefficient that people wired money into Coinbase and it didn't hit until like earlier this week, which is when they started buying.
Banking holiday Monday as well, which, may explain a little bit of that delay.
That's true.
I'm speculating and kind of joking at the same time, but it
no,
seems
I think you have a good point though.
Happened.
People saw that news, they send the money in, doesn't hit Friday, then they got to wait the 3 days. It hits Tuesday, and and we're cranking. And then if you look at the markets, we started really cranking as soon as the U.S. markets were fully open.
And this is something that I was talking about with Monty earlier. Is like if you look at the volume, it started for the past 3 consecutive days on Coinbase at like 8 to 11 a.m. So it's clearly that the Americans are bidding this time around spot, not just perps and futures. You actually saw a Coinbase premium of about 50 to 80 bucks over the last couple of days, which is very rare because usually you see the opposite. You see perps lead. So it was weird to see that little instance of backwardation, which I thought was a pretty good sign. As for Powell's comments, I think it just added like bullish fuel to the fire. I think when I was on a webinar with Monty earlier, I said any good news in the crypto market is like a glass of water in a desert right now. So
we're thirsty, baby. We are thirsty right now, and Jerome Powell just handed us a nice tall glass of water because what's crazy to think about is this is only the second time this year we've been above 30K. And, it's almost July. Like, price has been so lackluster. So many people have left the space because of that lackluster price action that now that we're getting some, relatively positive price action or some very positive price action, it makes me wonder, when do we see some of this sideline capital? When do we see some of the people that have been skeptical for the first 6 months of the year start to inject some capital back into this space? And I think the time is approaching, right? We have kind of the proverbial stars aligning in the sense that, Jerome Powell is talking about stablecoins as a currency. Um, Also we have risk on price action in the equity markets as well, looking relatively favorable over the last same amount of time, the same 6 months that crypto has been in this kind of state of limbo. Equity markets have been looking pretty strong. So now that we have those two boxes checked, it's like, what more do we need for Bitcoin to climb higher? I think this really is the start of, rather than like you said, Nick, rather than us hitting resistance here at 30K, I think this is the start of a climb higher on the back of positive rhetoric, on the back of positive price action in equity markets, and overall just an injection of that sideline capital that's kind of been waiting for an opportunity like this. And I think that now that it's here, we'll see some capital injected. It may take some time, like CJ said, but I think that eventually, you see Americans start spot buying on Coinbase. That's followed by the Asian bid, and that could drive us very well back above, into the 35, 40K range. So that's something that I am watching closely for, and I don't think is out of the realm of possibility whatsoever.
And speaking of U.S. based buying, now I definitely think we know that the U.S. is not the global finance, but without the U.S. it's certainly hard to make a case for extreme bullishness, or at least interim bullishness, as has been demonstrated by price action with the regulatory stuff. Now, with an ETF approval, I think we have no doubt that would have a massive impact on Bitcoin, because it opens up obviously more buys for these ETFs to house the assets that they need for redemptions and purchases of the ETF itself, but also the general interest in kind of proving that Bitcoin is here to stay, and it is it can be a new traditional financial asset for generations in the future. But I think one thing I wanted to ask you guys is, the past couple of times we've seen large pumps that were focused around US hours, generally a company or a very large individual has been buying, and MicroStrategy certainly comes to mind. At one point it was Tesla back in 2021. So what are the, and of course this isn't really full tinfoil hat on, but it is speculation as to what we're seeing in terms of spot volumes. Do we think that a MicroStrategy is kind of soaking up a lot of that US buying? Or do we think it could be someone like a BlackRock front running or participating in the bullishness of the news they created, or potentially just someone else? I mean, clearly they're US based. So, we can kind of, lop off, Asian billionaires and European billionaires, et cetera. But what do we think about that? Do we think it's, do we really think this is retail and institutional crowding in together? Or do we think this is one kind of large buyer moving the market up, as a lot of people still sit on the sidelines? I mean, if you go look at Twitter and you go look at, talk to our friends, you guys are talking in your webinars, it seems like a lot of people are still sidelined. So, in that case, if the ETF gets approved when we have more good news, that's good news for continued bullishness. But for right now, do we think this is someone, front running or trying to participate in the BlackRock news? Or do we really think that everybody is starting to pile in and make their deposits?
It's tough to say. I mean, you just kind of got to look at the volume and maybe the bids and so forth. One thing that I will say that I think you're just seeing a lot more institutional interest and American interest in general because of Larry Fink and BlackRock. I think there was a nice meme of like Gensler bending down and kissing the ring of Larry Fink. He was like, "You did good.
Seen a lot
kid.
of Gensler memes lately.
Now it's time for us to take over." And BlackRock is what, like 575 to 1 in ETF approvals. So they're going to get this passed. They virtually own the SEC, and the market is showing us that. So, whether it's one buyer, whether it's, this is what I was going to say. In terms of institutional purchasing, we saw a lot of calls being bought in Riot and Mara, the two crypto stocks. So I think that could also be a reflection of a lot of option buyers, whether they be institutional.
We talked about that a couple of weeks ago, CJ, because someone had asked us what we were bullish on and what we were bearish on. And I was like, mining stocks, you should definitely take a look at, because if the network continues to stay clogged, there's a bull case. And obviously Bitcoin price going up, that helps. So sorry, I just wanted to hop in. We did cover that a couple of weeks ago for anyone listening.
Yeah, I think Mara is like the 85th highest shorted stock on the market. So kind of explains why it had been squeezing so hard earlier this week. Bunch of assets we can talk about in terms of like what we're looking at.
Let's just go ahead and dive into Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Why not?
Let's do it.
So I'm just going to pull up a little bit about what I'm seeing. I'm on the 5 minutes. Let's go kick it to the 1 hours. Let's definitely want to get CJ and Monty's thoughts on their charts in here. But before we jump them in, what I'm looking at right now, and so this 31K level dates back to the highs that we experienced on the 14th of April. And so, clearly acting as some sort of resistance, but we've not, cleared those highs yet. And typically you will see those highs cleared. So for any bulls, what I'm looking at for this, and what we call this a continuation range. So clearly, that's the range high, but, we know that this is the actual, resistance on the macro side. And then we've got support here as notated by multiple taps at this level. And then we have a sweep of the lows, which is what we would look for bearishness above 31K. So we have a sweep of the lows, multiple taps here. So I'm looking at, this is likely a continuation range. Doesn't mean it is, but you look for a reclaim of support. Support holds as it has been. And as long as this level can continue to hold, you would typically expect Bitcoin to run to the top of the range. And then that is where we would look for potentially, a inverse of this price action. You get something like that, and then it would run the bottom of the range. Or obviously it would reclaim the 31K level and move higher, which would be a very solid macro break. I think you see a lot of people come in with a confirmed break of 31K. I'm not afraid to say a confirmed break of 31K would likely, I'd say rocket up to 32, 33, in my opinion. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. But I want to bring Monty and CJ in, because I know they look at things a little bit differently than I do, typically have similar feelings in the market. But what are you guys looking at for Bitcoin? You thinking similar? I definitely respect anyone who's saying that this is a good time to take a pause. And I personally don't have any trades open, although I do see, a bullish pattern forming. I'm just, things are getting a little precarious here for me. So what are you guys looking at, and what's catching your eye in terms of what you're predicting on Bitcoin price action? Either one, feel free to take it over.
Should take it, Monty?
Yeah. So if you want to go ahead and throw up my chart, Nick, it's funny because one thing that CJ had mentioned is BlackRock's essentially undefeated record against the SEC, right? And how they more or less don't put an ETF into motion unless it's going to get passed. And when I heard that BlackRock was making the ETF, where were we at? We were right around here. And I said that, to our community members, I said I'd be buying, some spot Bitcoin at these levels, at 25K. And the reason why I was doing that is because of my high conviction for not only something that you mentioned earlier, Nick, is the possibility of kind of people, front running this BlackRock ETF and, seeing that as validation for the space, because one, they do have an essentially undefeated record against the SEC, and two, like this does solidify them with like the Qs, which is also a ProShares, ETF. So that would really hoist Bitcoin into the mainstream. But I don't really want to talk that much about Bitcoin right now because we are coming up against some critical levels. What I want to talk about is ETH because I think there's some actual opportunity here. And with ETH, we often see it's interesting, right? How we see ETH move higher beta to Bitcoin, but not always, right? Because this ETF wasn't necessarily as positive news for Ethereum as it was for Bitcoin. That being said, I still think there's opportunity here. And when I look at this chart relative to what we've seen from Bitcoin, let me just go ahead and add this, right? Look at how significantly Bitcoin has outperformed. Not only that, but look at how Bitcoin has come up and retested the previous highs, right? And that's something that Nick mentioned earlier, how Bitcoin had come up, retested this critical level of 30K before promptly getting rejected. We haven't seen that same sort of behavior from Ethereum at all. That would be essentially 21K is my target for ETH. And although I won't be necessarily jumping into this immediately, what I will be looking to do is, wait for a breakout above this level, come down, consolidate at this level of about 1900. And then I think from there, we break above 2K and head back up towards that 2100 level. This is the sort of move I'm looking for. You can either, you can either buy on the breakout right here or buy on the retest of support here. But either way, I think that, this is looking favorable from a risk reward perspective, especially when you compare it with Bitcoin, which has significantly outperformed on the back of that, ETF news. So, although I'm very, I am bullish Bitcoin in the same way that I'm bullish ETH. If we saw that same formation occur where we get above this level, consolidate, come down, validate that this level is now flipped to support, and then climb higher, I'm looking to buy right here 100% because that's confirmation that this level is flipped from resistance to support. And from there, I think you let the ETF work its magic. You let BlackRock do its thing and allow more people to get exposure to Bitcoin. And with that, we see an increase in price. So that's kind of where I'm at right now, in terms of where Bitcoin may go. But I think right now, because Bitcoin's hitting that psychologically critical level of 30K, the opportunity actually is, really elsewhere in things like ETH, which haven't nearly, reclaimed those same highs that we've seen in Bitcoin and in ETH. So that's what I'm seeing for Bitcoin. That's what I'm seeing for ETH. And those are the moves I'll be looking to make. Ultimately, I want to see those levels of resistance flip to support. Once you get that confirmation, I think that you can enter these trades with a lot more conviction and ultimately, benefit from the upside a lot more. So that's where I'm at right now. But CJ, would love to get your thoughts as well.
Yeah, before we bring CJ in, I definitely agree with you there, Monty. One thing I just wanted to hop in with is, what we've been talking about for the past several months, I think, and something that I mentioned on the TTC Daily Show yesterday is the position we're in on ETH BTC. So remember, we were talking about these equal highs, and if the equal highs rejected, we would likely see at least the lows of the range. Well, we obviously dipped well below this range right here. And we grabbed these lows, which were, I believe, the lowest point of 2023 thus far. So these are the lows of 2022 all the way down here. So, we could certainly still run those lows. But, just trading in kind of the same thesis of the equal highs right here is we kind of have a triple tap right here. And we did run these lows. So as long as the 0.062 level holds, I think, we can make it back to 0.065 and then potentially reclaim that to keep this range intact as it is right now. And obviously a confirmed break below 0.62 would invalidate that. But if you are, building off of Monty's narrative right there, if you like, ETH's, if you believe that ETH's lack of volatility compared to Bitcoin is going to, equalize at some point in time, now is the time to probably make that bet, or at least in the next couple of days, if ETH BTC can hold 0.062. So apologies,
thank
but
you.
I wanted to
thank you for bringing that up, because I had meant to mention that and I forgot. So good stuff.
Yeah, we talk about it a lot, so I just wanted to make sure we gave some context to that. But I mean, Monty is certainly very correct here in terms of this is when you would want to start to look for that trade given ETH BTC positioning. So apologies about that, CJ. Please hop in with your analysis.
I didn't even know you were going to pull this up, but I'm glad you did.
Oh, I can make it disappear if you'd like, but I figured you'd have something to share. So
too late. It's already out there.
More Kramer memes.
We like Coinbase to 475. Yeah, I mean,
You talked about coin last session, right? A week ago, correct?
Yeah, we were talking about bidding it because Kramer capitulated or whatever. Plus, the market wasn't looking too bad. And I really like trading off the idea of news, especially when you're at kind of the range lows here. But the whole idea behind the Coinbase trade was we dropped to $46 following the FCC lawsuit news. Ever since we've gone higher. And, if I'm right on this particular idea, then, theoretically, we should never trade below 47 in any respectable manner in the next few months. And if we do, that's exactly where I know I'm wrong. The SEC lawsuit news was not enough of a news failure to create the bottom, and therefore we could head lower. So I know exactly where the risk reward is on this particular trade. And if you kind of go with the assumption that it's just not going to trade below 50 ever again, at least not till 25 or 26, then you can buy a lot of Coinbase here with a lot of potential upside. Even though it's been kind of underperforming Bitcoin, it's got very defined risk. And the asymmetric upside is so clear in my mind that I'm just going to keep bidding it. So yeah, that's my only real equity pick in terms of Bitcoin. But I do like it a lot, and we'll see if it goes to 475.
It's pretty shocking that an SEC lawsuit that more or less, is a direct threat. Oops, that's the wrong one. Is a direct threat to their entire business model. I mean, if they can only trade Bitcoin, that I would expect that stock to be back near the lows of 2022.
That'd be bad.
So, I mean, 100%. So the market is almost, it only swept the 2023 lows. I guess, those lows are near 30, just given when the yearly opened, but, the recent 2023 lows. And that, I mean, in my opinion, just, you always look for relative strength in the market. And when you see something getting not as beat down as you would really expect from something that's impactful as that, it does seem to me like the market's really calling the SEC's bluff in this aspect as well. So just another kind of ding, ding, ding for CJ. But it's shocking to me that we couldn't even break the recent lows on one of the most calamitous lawsuits the industry's ever seen. So
it's the power of news failure events. The other thing I think you have to consider is they're going to open up the international arm for futures trading. They're also going to list crude oil futures. I was kind of making a joke with Monty earlier. Crypto traders are going to see that and be like, what's WTI? Is that a new ICO? Let's buy it. But in all seriousness, I do think that's kind of an interesting trade. I will say, quite brutally honest with you, if I would have just bought Bitcoin with that same amount of capital, I would have been up more. Coinbase has been underperforming Bitcoin over the past week, but we'll see if we see that rotation of capital into things like ETH BTC, into things like other assets. But kind of pleased that this has rallied back today and did buy a little bit earlier when we were down about 2%. So we'll see if that holds ultimately.
Well, hey, it's also a stock though, CJ. So next earnings, if all that revenue picks up from volumes, I'm sure people are pricing it in right now. But if it becomes a thing, then you may see a little bit more of that green area filled up too. So it's also important to remember that altcoins are pure speculation, and there's a little bit more fundamentals to this stock trade. So
Coinbase is basically an altcoin. but Nick, I wanted to get your thoughts on the miners, because I noticed that they'd been kind of beaten down relatively hard over the last, not too bad, but I mean, we came up, retested those range highs, not too atypical with, given what we've seen from Bitcoin's price action. But, you talked a lot about these last week. Any, insight into, or are you trading any of these?
No, it's a great question, and apologies for the silence there. I was just pulling the stock up. So we actually talked about this. I don't exactly remember what day, but I do remember the conversation of being underneath the 1 day 200 estimated 200 moving average, and a break above that we said would definitely be a buy. It was definitely not the cleanest buy. Well, it was a clean buy, but the retest, was not as obvious because it broke above, it retested it very quickly and then moved higher. So that was one of those, if you were scared from, previous fake breakouts, this was a tougher one to trade in that methodology. But if it can stay above this range right here at this range, as it's already kind of forming a nice little potentially bullish wick right there above the, it looks like it's above the weekly VWAP as well. So if it can stay above, in my opinion, 1180, then definitely has the chance for continuation. And I would say the first target that you would look for would probably be right around 14, maybe up to, near 16. So I'm currently not trading them, to be honest with you. I'm fully focused on crypto. I resisted being the meme of trading, equities, when crypto is down bad, because I think if I would have started trading equities, then I would have, not had as much capital ready for this crypto rally. But, we did talk that, miners were looking very positive, or had a positive narrative, at least, on the heels of A, Bitcoin network being clogged, and then B, this ETF news, which really elevates Bitcoin status. So that's what I'm looking at. But what about you, Monty or CJ? Anything catching your eye on the miners?
They've been performing really well. Like I said earlier in the show, Mara was one of the top shorted stocks in the entire equity market. So we'll see if that continues to squeeze higher. Certainly could. In terms of things that I want to talk about, or things that I'm looking at, Monty, I'll let you share, but I would like to talk about Pepe in just a moment.
No. Yeah, let's quickly go over equities first. It is a little boring, but let's get that out of the way, and then let's move into the fun stuff. So, I don't have too much on equities right now, but we are in a very interesting position. I believe we mentioned the possibility of this, whoops, a little delay there. Remember, we mentioned the possibility of this being a deviation, which is never a good sign to deviate that quickly above in and out of the range. So that's something to be wary of. We also have the dollar, which is putting in, that's bullish divergence on the 12-hour. And I never, when it comes to equities trades, the bull and bear div usually play out more often than not, much more so on crypto. So if the dollar does, break above this 102.4 level and jump back up to the estimated 200 moving average, or possibly all the way up to 103.6, I do think that equities would likely be the first class to really take a hit. So something I'm looking at right now, and I hate that my support and resistance levels don't hold, but I think if we ended up breaking back below, I think, maybe this 43.80 level, somewhere around here, which we're hovering just above, that's not going to be a good sign in the short term. So I think you really need to, you really want to hold 43.80, else you're going to jump back down to 4,300. And then that's when things get really, difficult, because if you don't hold that level, then you broke back below this high. And then your battle higher gets tougher and tougher. So I don't have a clear read, but I did find this very interesting. I don't know how long this will last, but noticed this morning, and I was like, we haven't seen this in a while. Equities and Bitcoin are inverse and have been for, I think, since mid-June. So, mostly running a little bit, some correlation, and then just straight up inverse since equities hit their highs. So Bitcoin moving higher, equities moving lower. So I thought that was interesting, but nothing to really trade off of, in my opinion. Just to make sure that we get the full 360-degree perspective. Anything you guys are seeing in equities? I mean, for me, it's really a no trade. DXY, maybe powering back, certainly may instill some fear. But I think, crypto's got a much better volatility right now, and you gotta go to the markets where it's hot. So what are you guys thinking?
I actually like that you brought up the DXY, because I do think it's possible to see a scenario where you see things like NASDAQ ES kind of remain neutral, or maybe even go up while the dollar goes up. And that kind of has to do with how bullish the dollar positioning has been recently. But I mean, personally, what I see in terms of like ES and equities, one would assume we could have a little bit of a pullback here just because of how impressive the run has been. But I have to imagine that like everybody still wants to be first to like what is perceived as to be the short of like the last decade and a half. Like this is like, it feels like everybody wants to capture the big short here. And I don't know if they're going to get it right away. I mean, we could potentially correct here in ES and NASDAQ a little bit. Everyone tries to short it. Plus you have sidelined participants. And then it just squeezes to new all-time highs. So that would be like the super cycle idea coming back into play. Said this with Monty earlier. It'd be kind of ironic if we actually did go into a super cycle and Suzu blew up and never even got the ability to enjoy it.
Well, hey, they have 3AC Ventures now, so they're positioning.
Yeah, criminals will find a way if you don't put them behind bars.
Note to self: if you ever blow up a fund, just move to Bali and you can start right over. So
it's not that hard to just not blow up either. Like,
hey, why, CJ? Who cares about blowing up when you just move to Bali? So
yeah, they weren't even worried about that. Wait, but one thing I had to say just about equities in general. I mean, if you take a look at the Qs, like since the beginning of 2023, they've essentially been in up only mode. And at what point does that stop? At what point do we see some profit taking in the equity markets? I think if there were a time for it to happen, it would be around about now. Like if you want to throw up my chart real quick, Nick.
Yeah.
Like just looking at, so this is another ProShares ETF courtesy of BlackRock, the Qs, for those of you that didn't know. But look at how essentially in the last like 3 to 4 months, this has just been up only, never dipping below the 20-period smooth moving average. Didn't hit resistance until we came back up against this level here. But now what I think is most interesting is where we go from here. And I was not expecting a bullish candle today. And this is a relatively bullish candle, right? On decent bullish volume. But we'll see how this finishes. I think if we plausibly get continuation on the back of positive rhetoric, on the back of injection of some of that sideline capital we've been talking about, we get above this level, there's really no resistance for the Qs until like until the 400 level. So that's a significant move to the upside without very much resistance whatsoever. And I think that that's not out of the realm of possibility at all. Because, you know, when I take a look at the Qs and what they've done so far this year, despite macroeconomic conditions, despite the rhetoric on CNBC, despite the rhetoric on, many major pundits, they've all been overwhelmingly bearish. What happens if they flip bullish? What happens if CNBC all of a sudden says, hey, maybe it's time to be buying some stock?
Monty, they did, and I was gonna bring that up. I was literally watching CNBC yesterday, and they had a woman on. I think she was from Bank of America, one of their top analysts or economists. And the Chiron, the little the little running tab that they have at the bottom that tells you the breaking news or whatever. It would best time to be positioned bullish in a decade, and I was like, this woman is old enough to have been around a decade ago. Interest rates were 0%. I can explain I can very much explain the bullishness a decade ago. What I can't explain is I'm not a bear. I do think that assets will eventually trade higher, and we've likely left the lows. But that doesn't mean we're just going to keep going up in the immediate short term. And I'm hearing a Bank of America analyst say this is the best time to be positioned bullish in a decade. And I'm just thinking right back to CJ telling me, always be wary anytime you hear a headline or see a news article that's overly bullish at resistance. And so I do agree with Monty. If we get above that resistance, snap reaction higher. But, I'm not buying the bull case with Jerome Powell again today saying 2 more rate hikes, no rate cuts in 2023. And very little QE looking like it's coming in the near future. So there certainly is a bull case, a lot of sideline money. Again, Monty's narrative, break above that resistance, probably gonna have a lot of people step in. But the broader case to say we're the most bullish in a decade, it's a fool's errand in my opinion right now. So CJ, you look like you've been thinking of something.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the analysts start to turn one by one. And, I think we're like maybe a third or halfway to see all the analysts kind of turn bullish, because it's one thing when you see, 1 or 2 people saying one thing very adamantly, but it's a completely different thing when every single person is saying the exact same thing. And you still have a lot of people bearish. I know exactly the person who I'm going to fade once they flip bullish. So I've kind of been waiting for that, but that particular individual hasn't flipped bullish yet. As for the argument regarding like rates and whether or not this is an bullish environment or that we could be going into an expansion, I don't know. All I have to say is that the argument of increasing interest rates, therefore, excuse me 1 minute, folks.
CJ getting a call on the bat phone. Let's go ahead and mute CJ really quick. Just let him have that.
It's the regulators.
Yeah, Gary Gensler just called CJ and told them to shut his mouth. So
I'm sorry about that. But the point about interest rates is like people will say, or the thesis this year has been, you look at the regime we've been in for the past decade and a half, where we've had, and even going back to like the 80s or 90s, where you've had interest rates continually going lower, resulting in higher asset values. I don't think that's the only thing that results in the market going up. And to assume that switching that regime from higher rates for longer, like that argument's been wrong the entire year. There's no reason in my mind to think that it couldn't continue to be wrong. Plus, when you think about fundamentals, there's a case like in Hong Kong, when you look at the Hang Seng Index, I think it was for like the early 2000s or maybe the 90s. And if you would have told me like, all right, this is a particular economy that's going to have a lot of growth, low interest rates, low inflation, where's the stock market going to be in 10 years? You would say, well, with those fundamentals, it should be at least 2x or 3x higher. And it didn't do anything. It remained flat. So you got to look at the positioning. In my opinion, that's what's truly going to give you an edge, because the fundamentals are like, macro has lost so many people money this year. It's almost funny. Sadly, kind of, but
Yeah.
Let's
Well,
can
I
we get
think
to Pepe now?
yeah,
Last thing.
we have a good question that I think just relates to what we're talking about now, so we might as well answer it because I think it's not too much of a difficult answer. But Andrew in the comments and Richard, we will get to LTC, after we talk about Pepe. So Andrew in the comments asked, in the very short term, next few weeks, would you expect to see profit taking from funds or rebalancing? He gave examples of holdings like Tesla and Nvidia. And he made the note, prior to July 1st. And remember the next quarter begins at the end of this month, beginning of next month. So, he asked a really good question about rebalancing as we're hitting the end of Q2. We're entering the summer. The summer is typically a more relaxed trading environment with less volatility, less action. Now that could change now that we're experiencing the first kind of bullish run since the height of COVID and all that fun stuff. So fund managers may say butts in chair trade this fall. But you make a good point, and especially in the context of touching recent highs, into June, coming off the highs a little bit, and we've got about 9 days left until the end of the month. Even less than that in terms of trading days. So we probably got about 4, 5, 6 trading days, maybe. That would imply, some sort of rebalancing or cooling off of buying, at least. So in my opinion, it does line up with a little bit of pullback action. But that pullback action could be July 1st and July 2nd, and then July 3rd and 4th starts buying again. So don't just think just because it's July 1, funds are going to sell for 90 days. That's likely not going to be the case, although it could be. So CJ or Monty, any take on this? But in terms of timing and macro environment, probably a good time to take a little bit of risk off the table heading into Q3.
Yeah, I guess if you're long from lower levels, it's kind of just like long until you're wrong type thing. But I guess the short answer to your question, Andrew, is that I don't know. We've seen little bits of sell-off, going into month rebalancing, end of month rebalancing, especially end of quarter rebalancing. So I think that's an interesting point, and I appreciate you bringing it up. But I would say the short answer, unfortunately for me, is I don't know. It could or it could not. Monty, what do you think?
Listen, I think it definitely, we've seen it time and time again, quarterly rebalancing having, leaning to some slight pullbacks, particularly in stocks that have been performing very well leading into the end of that quarter. And I think we've had a lot of stocks that check those boxes. So, yeah, sure, we could definitely see a slight pullback on the back of some rebalancing here. But I think what Nick raised is like, do we see the rebalancing now and then just immediate continuation of positive price action? I think that is where the real question is. I think we will see rebalancing at the end of the quarter. That's just what we see. But what has me pondering the most is when buyers will step back in after that quarterly rebalancing. I think it could be as soon as the first week of July. We see a continuation of bullish price action and ultimately kind of an erasement of those, losses from rebalancing at end of quarter. So I think that, yeah, we will see a slight pullback here. Wouldn't necessarily want to be getting long here. But at the start of next month, when we have this in the rear view, I think we could plausibly see a continuation of this positive price action. And, you could have a chance to get in at some more favorable levels than you would otherwise without that end of quarter rebalancing.
100%. So hope that helped, Andrew. And, feel free to ask any more questions in the chat. Happy to answer them at any time. So CJ, the moment is here. Is Pepe going to flip SHIB, and exactly at what date and time is it going to flip SHIB so that I can trade that event?
Here, let me put it on the daily chart so you guys, I'll just zoom in so you guys can see it a bit better. So I'm gonna go into philosopher mode about human nature very quickly, and Monty, you can call me out on this pseudo-intellectual rant in a moment, but let me go first. Crypto's kind of changed a little bit at least since 2021, I made the mistake of not being more aggressive with things like Dogecoin because I thought the market was going to mature into, fundamentals. Things like, Uniswap and Chainlink were very desirable at that same particular time. This is a time where the alts, specifically L1s, were first coming into play. And I was like, this is what the market's, going to value. They're not going to value some stupid meme coin and Dogecoin or Sheeb. But you have to realize that the majority of the market doesn't really care about the technology, or at least that's what we've kind of seen reflected in price action. The market cares about opportunity and volatility. And my argument with Pepe and why I bought some after seeing this most recent move was because the new wave of crypto investors, in my opinion, the biggest use case or the most accurate use case that no one wants to talk about is just the fact that it gets people rich. Obviously not everybody, people have lost billions, but the stories of seeing, 20-year-old kids put 5 or 10K into a meme coin and then become millionaires, that's what keeps bringing speculators and gamblers back into the market that is then being reflected in coins like Pepe. I mean, I don't know if froth is the right word, but I think there's pent up demand in the market that we've seen reflected come out in things like Pepe. I mean, what was it, like the first crypto asset ever to go to $1 billion market cap?
Yeah.
So with that being said, I think that it's potentially going to come back with a vengeance, almost like Dogecoin did. And I've kind of been saying this to Monty is Pepe like the generation, or is Pepe the next Dogecoin for the next Zoomer generation who's going to come in and hopefully, be all of our exit liquidity, or so to speak? It's sort of looking like it. I mean, what do you guys think to that whole kind of pseudo intellectual philosophizing I just did?
I mean, I definitely agree with you. I was going to make a couple of quips in the beginning about the coins you had mentioned, just because I think a lot of us had similar beliefs, and the market continues to remain more irrational than we can remain rational. You mentioned Link, which is had horrible price performance recently. Uniswap as well. Two heavily used applications in the crypto market, and their token is been beat down. And I know many people who only bought Dogecoin during the 2017 run up, and who only held Dogecoin through 2019 and into 2020, who now do nothing ever because they had enough Dogecoin. So I would never personally tell somebody you should have all of your money in Doge or Pepe. But I will say, when the going gets hot and the attention economy is in full force, holding a lot of Doge and or a lot of Pepe is likely a good decision. So it's a tough catch-22, because I would never tell anybody to put all their money into Pepe right now. But in 1 week, 2 week, even a year's time, Pepe could be many, many, many multiples higher. And your loss can only be 100%. So if you have the capital to make this type of alternative bet, it's certainly, something worth taking. But I would not, if you only have 10, 20, 50K or whatever, and your kids got to eat, and you got to fund college tuitions and stuff like that, maybe not the right bet. But, if you're me, Monty, CJ, a couple grand, several grand in a Pepe Doge bag, whatever, probably not going to hurt you too bad in the long run. In my opinion.
I was actually considering opening my child's trust fund in Pepe coin. I know it may not be the safest, but I mean, he'll either be a billionaire or he'll be broke, and either way, there's a lot of lessons to be learned with those.
Yeah,
Monty doesn't actually have any dependents. He's just making a joke for those who.
But what are we thinking for Pepe price action? Or is now a good buy? I mean, I know people who bought 50% ago who were like, I'm loving this buy, but I don't know if I like it right now.
Let me address some of these comments, because I'm really being amused. So one comment here says, it's just another shitcoin made by scammers. Scams pump the hardest. It is what it is. XRP back in the day, Dogecoin, Richard Hart's scam went up like 1,000%. I mean, you couldn't sell it because every idiot staked it for like 10 years. But the
20.
point is that when people are afraid to buy something and they're going to try and short it, price has a way of creating max pain for the market participants and just pushing price higher. And, you know, to claim that this rally has been created by TUSD doesn't really make sense to me, because TUSD you can't buy Bitcoin on Coinbase with TUSD. You might be able to, I'm not sure, but that's a Binance thing. That's a Binance thing. And this entire rally has been spot driven, led by Coinbase buyers. So the cartel can't really take any credit for this move, in my opinion.
And listen, you can't, we're living in 2023. Someone that's 18 years old was born in 2005. What were you doing in 2005? You think they have the common sense?
I was on MySpace in 2005.
You think they have the common sense, or not even common sense, because I do think it could work out for them. But do you think that they, look at Pepe versus look at Tesla, and weigh the differences or anything like that? If Bitcoin breaks above 30K and goes into local highs, so will Pepe. And then you'll have all these kids between the ages of 18 and 22 that were born after 9/11 buying this coin like crazy. That's just the way it goes. And it's not that Pepe's the first instance of this, right? We've seen Dogecoin pump on the back of a younger demographic. We've seen many Shiba Inu, many other altcoins pump on the back of younger demographics. And don't underestimate that, because if it goes into risk on price action, then so will Pepe. And with that will come the kind of degenerate gamblers looking to get rich quick and, stacking up the Pepe bags.
And I do agree, Pepe could be a scam that is created by scammers. And, a lot of people thought the same about Doge. Certainly could be a rug at some point in time. But
wasn't SafeMoon a rug too? That went up like 1,000,000%.
Exactly. So this is something we don't recommend holding for your entire life, but it is part of an alternative investment strategy that has done very well for people over time. So, and we're covering it because it's popular. If Pepe wasn't one of the top traded coins on most centralized exchanges right now, probably wouldn't be talking about it. But people are trading it. There's a lot of interest, and I don't think that that's going to die today. It may decrease today, but I think in the long run, heading into this next bull market, good opportunity play. And one thing that I'm looking at here, and I think this is just a really good thing to compare it to, and you can obviously do Pepe BTC for that kind of trade, but I think, comparing Pepe versus SHIB, because SHIB was kind of the next Doge, if you will, when it was released, and Pepe is now, everyone's talking about Pepe, usurping Doge. So this is a good kind of proxy chart just to look at, as opposed to just Pepe USDT. If this continues to creep higher, which I think it probably will, then it's probably a pretty good bet to make. And it's another type of alternative investment you can make as opposed to just holding Pepe. You can long Pepe, you can short SHIB of equal size, and then you can play in a little bit more of a safer type of investment rather than just longing Pepe with all your money. So that's an interesting idea that I wanted to throw out there as well. Let's talk about some other altcoins as well. I know Litecoin, I believe the halvening is slated for August 2nd. I haven't actually checked that in a couple of weeks, but I believe it's still slated for that date. So on the daily, definitely getting a little precarious. We never liked, any tweezer action. A doji is never fun to look at, especially, after a nice little run. But let's look at the positives here. It's above the low from June, from early June, and it is above the 1-day estimated 200 moving average. So nice little confluence of support, in my opinion. If it can hold 83, 8360, 8370, then it definitely has legs to attack $91, in my opinion. And of course, a reclaim of 91 will send it to the highs of 97. And then if you can get above that, then you've finally got these highs to contend with, which are the current 2023 highs. Now, Definitely going to be tough to break above that by August 2nd, just given the recent price action, but I would never really count LTC out. And this is a really good test for the Bitcoin halvening, because also remember, LTC is one of those coins that's going to be traded on EDX along with Bitcoin Cash, Ethereum, and Bitcoin. So Bitcoin Cash and Litecoin obviously getting, really good boosts off the heels of that news. But the question is, how long will that maintain? So as long as the halvening news is around, I am still bullish, provided we stay above these lows. But it is a little bit worrying that we are not even near the 2023 highs, with the halvening about 5-6 weeks away. So what are your guys' thoughts? Do you agree with the analysis? Do you have some alternative analysis? Let's hear
it. For me, I think that level that you have highlighted right there at 91.44 is going to be by far the most critical level. I mean, we've clearly had a series of continual higher lows. Lower highs, and indicated by those green circles that you have there. And how much does the halving really affect Litecoin? How much are people really paying attention? That's a question that I have yet to be able to answer, like, despite, Litecoin's various halving events. But I don't think that without the positive price action of Bitcoin, this thing sees any sustained positive price action. I think at the very most, independently, we see a move up to that 91.44 level. But beyond that, without Bitcoin, heading up towards 35K, I don't see Litecoin making any sort of substantial move on the back of that halving narrative.
Anything on your end, CJ?
I don't have too strong of an opinion on Litecoin. I haven't been trading it, but we'll see if this narrative's got legs. It certainly could, but it's just not something that I've been looking at. I can't really get a great read on it. Just kind of like I said earlier, I guess kind of like long until you're wrong is kind of the general thesis of the market right here, especially if Bitcoin reaches new highs, local highs, that is. So yeah, I don't know. In terms of selecting alts, what I've been doing, or what I've kind of how I've been approaching this, is like you just look at whatever has the strongest relative strength in terms of the alts, and then I would just buy that. Like, remember when Aptos was going up at the first start of the echo bubble? Everybody's like, this is horrible fundamentally. This has got predatory tokenomics. And then, of course, it goes up like 1,000%.
Yeah.
So listen to the tape. The tape is going to tell you far more than any of these narratives really can. So
yeah, and there's one coin that's worth mentioning here, which is more or less a fresh coin that has pretty much nothing going for it. But it is Sui. Let's go ahead and get that.
That's like Aptos's. That's Aptos's brother, basically.
Yeah, it's foreign cousin with mental challenges. So there's no real clear read on this, but you can draw out pretty simple like supports and resistance levels just based on previous price action. But in terms of relative strength, if you kind of just look at the timeline here, it was on the move higher before, or right around when the ETF news started breaking. So speaking of relative strength, now it could certainly just get rejected and killed here at this 90-cent level. So something to watch out for there. But I did see relative strength out of this, when the ETF news was breaking, and obviously into this rally. And although it doesn't look like much, from the lows, that's the wrong thing. From the lows to where it is now, that's a 60% move. So this is certainly a volatile coin that will take your money very quickly on the wrong trade. But I did just find this fascinating that it was moving very, strong moves and generally just a pretty bullish trajectory since the 10th of June. So something I wanted to point out as well. Before we go, because we are running out of time, we're at the top of the hour, so it's a very full session today. But any coins, Monty, CJ, that you guys wanted to cover before we go, because I think we've got some suggestions from the audience. If the audience has any ones that they can throw out, very quickly, we can definitely go over one more audience suggestion. But if not, CJ, Monty, anything on your end? And if not, we'll go ahead and wrap things up.
As far as I'm concerned and the stuff that I've been messing around with, basically just long Bitcoin, Coinbase, and Pepe. In terms of trades or other things, the only thing I'm going to open up today is British pound shorts if we close red, because Bank of England raised interest rates by 50 basis points today, which was a pretty big surprise to the market to combat inflation. So when you get a raise or an increase in interest rates, you expect to see the currency appreciate or strengthen in value. And that's not what the pound has been doing. It's kind of going red at the top of an uptrend. So I think that's an interesting one to consider news failure on. Kind of reminds me of how we had like a weak CPI prints and then gold never went up. That's like something that should be bullish gold, but it just never pushed it up. So you're seeing kind of the same thing with the British pound right now. It should be going higher according to this news, but it's not. So that's one that I'm going to take a look at the close today and the next 45 minutes.
Alrighty, how about you, Monty?
The only real thing that we haven't mentioned today that I've been trading, and that I actually went ahead and exited, but I haven't had a chance to tell you guys since we didn't see you on Monday, is Meta. And Meta had a really nice run, but it's kind of filled this gap here. As you can see, this gap on the left side here has officially been more or less filled. And when you see that, that's a great indication to take profit, right? Look at this from a technical perspective. Right as soon as this gap was filled, boom, you should have exited and you would have had a nice tidy profit. I did take 1/3 off the table. I am still riding this up. I still think there's more upside potential until we get nearer to this earnings date. There are options that expire on Friday the 21st, and those are the options that I'm trading. 1 day before earnings, I think that is kind of the best way to capture volatility heading into earnings. And I think that despite the fact that this gap has filled, there is still plausibly more upside potential. But other than that, I think we covered pretty much everything that I have been trading this week so far.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a full session for obviously a full week. We definitely are excited about the price action above 30K, but as we told the Trade the Chain community today, and I'm sure Monty and CJ also warned their community, now is the time to be a little bit more fearful when we're $6,000, $5,000 above where we were trading at just a week ago. So doesn't mean we can't head higher. We're obviously rooting for that and positioned if it does occur. But my recommendation is for everybody to cool it on the leverage at these levels, because typically after a large boost where higher time frame levels are overextended, we will see some consolidation. And that consolidation typically condenses into a range where, if you are a range trader and can identify that, great trading. But if you are a breakout trader or a swing trader, typically a little bit more painful, and a pause is always recommended, and take profits as well. Please take profits on some of these moves. So with that being said, we will see you guys on Monday. Of course, before the July before the end of the month, which will be an exciting conversation in reference to what Andrew mentioned. We'll see how it goes in terms of funds maybe taking money off the table or pulling back some of their positions. And we'll have some unemployment data coming up, as well as more inflation data as we start July. So always something to talk about, always news breaking, and we are here to break it down for you guys every single week. So final note, CJ and Monty, please give us how we can reach you guys in your community before we head out.
Yeah, just check out the link below at marketrebellion.com/try crypto. Monty and I publish our trade ideas in real time. We also do a morning briefing and talk about our trades each and every day. We also have an education curriculum and a platform with live chat, so you can talk to us as well as other community members, and should have some big news coming up in the next few weeks that we're excited to share about you guys. Huge upgrade for us. So looking forward to that, and hope all is well. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, and hint, hint, do a little wink, wink, but, try out Trade the Chain if you so desire. Very similar to Market Rebellion, offers, a little bit different data and different community, but, all very complimentary at the end of the day. And we very much enjoy working with CJ and Monty with our community at Trade the Chain as well. So with that being said, we're going to get out of here, attack some more trades, and maybe relax a little bit as the U.S. market closes down. But good luck. Happy trading. We will see everybody on Monday.
Take care.